we know very well that war and torture and invasions and violations of human rights don't sort of float through the sky and come out of nowhere like a thunderstorm on a Sunday afternoon. They are created, they are caused, they are for the benefit of governments and corporations that know exactly what they're doing. And one of the things I've appreciated through the years with ECAWAR is that there have always been people around our work that have forcefully reminded us that we don't just rally to say end war or we want peace, but we rally to draw attention to those deliberate actions by governments and corporate powers that are responsible for these things in our world. And so for the next few minutes, we're going to ask Peggy Morton, who's one of the faithful long-time members of ECAWAR, to come up and just as one of those people that have done that kind of work with us, to share a little bit, looking back, reviewing our history, and musing about what lies ahead. Peggy.
Woo! You know, it's a joy to be here with all of you, some of you who we've worked together since the beginning of ECAWAR and before. I was thinking about, you know, my first demonstration, peace demonstration that I ever went to while I was thinking about what to say today. And thinking, oh, now maybe I'm the veteran, you know. So then I talked to Ken Collier, who tells me he went to his first demonstration in 1958. And then I was thinking about our Palestinian sisters whose entire lives, from the time that they were tiny children, has been a fight and a struggle, who were driven from their homelands and have spent their entire lives fighting for peace and for justice. And so, you know, it's an honor to be together with all of us who, if we added it all up, are thousands and thousands of years of taking a stand and fighting and working for a new world which we are going to bring into being. So how to talk about the 10 years? How to talk about the 10 years? It was, you know, I've tried various ways of thinking about how to do that. So, in the end, I think the issue is with history, even if it's our own small 10-year history, to try and sum it up for purposes of saying, what do we need to do now? And what is it that's facing us right now? So really, this 10 years that we're talking about, it's really 11 years or 12 years, because it really starts with 9/11 and the very, very profound changes that have taken place in the world since that time. And I'll come back to that. But if we start with the days in which ECAWAR was founded, it was a very different situation we were facing because the Chrétien government was in power at that time. And that government, for its own reasons, opposed Canada's participation in the war in Iraq. So it opposed it because it opposed Bush's unilateralism, not because it opposed the war in and of itself. So that was the first challenge that hit us. Is, well, what's our stand? And we found out that our stand and Chrétien's stand were very, very different. So you might say, well, what difference did it make? We were just organizing everyone to stand together and oppose the war. But it was a very important stand that we took at that time, because without it, we might have lost our way in the future. And that was that we analyzed what Chrétien had to say, and we said that this can't be our stand. That so long as the United Nations Security Council endorses a war, then everything's fine, and Canada should go along with that, because that U.S.-dominated Security Council is violating the very principles on which the United Nations was established. And so if that is where we take our stand, and not from those principles which come from the world united as one against fascism, which come from the people's resolve to say never again, and which was translated into the principle that aggression is the supreme crime, and that we stand against aggression, and that we stand with people everywhere who are fighting for their own self-determination. So really a lot of the discussions and the stands that ECAWAR has taken subsequently really flowed from that first question, that first issue that faced us. So anyway, as far as that's concerned, the other part of that period is the question that the world's people really stood as one. You know, millions and millions of people came out on a worldwide basis and said no, that, you know, no to aggressive war, no to war against Iraq. And so it was, you know, it was a very heady time. It felt really wonderful that you were there and you knew that there was 1 million people in London and Madrid and Paris and all over the world, in India and Pakistan, in the Middle East, you name it, everywhere people were standing up. So it was very heady, but the world's people weren't able to stay the hand of the imperialists. And a great deal of disaster has flowed from that. So from that time also came the very, very serious question, why not? Why is it that the popular will of the people of Canada and the will of the people of the world isn't translated into the governments that we elect? Why is it that those governments that we elect don't represent us, don't represent Canadians? And you can go right back to nuclear warheads, to cruise missiles, to nuclear testing, to the war in Vietnam. You know, again and again and again we find that the people of Canada, together with the people of the world, have stood for peace. They want Canada to be a factor for peace, but that governments have acted instead, as Jim pointed out, on the behest of imperialism, of the drive of imperialism for for world domination. So that's the problem we face today, and we've never faced it in more acute form than we face right now, because we have a government which simply says that whatever it does, it has a mandate to do whatever it likes, and it's not going to discuss it, and if you don't agree, then you are a traitor, you are a terrorist, you are anti-Canadian, you don't follow Canadian values, and everything else. So, I mean, it's not new in the sense that it's the Cold War logic, but it's coming to us in very, very acute form now, that the thing that we put forward, which is the fight to establish an anti-war government, means also that we have to tackle this problem of democracy, that the form in which we find ourselves and in which they're trying to impose on the, I mean, you know, just to put it simply, imagine that the people of the world want to have a system where the end result is that they get Harper, you know, and that this is what we're supposed to believe, that we are going to help the people of the world bringing this kind of democracy, when Canadians are, you know, more and more saying that this is fundamentally a problem we have to solve. That this government does not represent the will of Canadians, the popular will, and that we have to solve that problem of a system of governance which will reflect the popular will of the people. So if we go back to that period, the next question that came up, really, was the questions around Palestine. And I mean, the discussion began a long time before that in ECAWAR, but I'll just give you one example. I remember getting an email, because it's just sort of, you know, sometimes you get these emails and they sort of hit you in the head. Like you get the emails that say, well, you're a racist and all this because you're opposing Zionism, and so, you know, okay, fine. But then somebody wrote an email demanding that ECAWAR present the Jewish point of view. Okay, so according to them, you have the Arab point of view and the Jewish point of view. You don't have the point of view that stands for peace and principles and justice, you know, and then the point of view that stands for war and aggression, and then one has to take our stand. So that was a real issue for us, because what came up in ECAWAR on the question of the defense and support of the rights of the Palestinian people was that we also had to tackle the question of, do people have the right to resist? You know, or do people, as Stephen Harper, like if you go by Stephen Harper's world, okay, what is it? Terrorism is anybody who resists the imposition of the dictate of the US, right? And self-defense is anybody who is imposing that dictate on the people of the world. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to. So we also had to deal with that question, that not only do the people have the right to self-determination, but that people have the right to resist. And that we're not going to buy into this idea, you know, that violence is, that we, like I was asked by the press last week, well, so you're saying, they said, that you're against violence on both sides. I said, no, we're not saying that, because how could we possibly presume to tell the Palestinian people how to fight the battle they have to fight to win their rights? This is a matter for the Palestinian people. So this has also become a very, very important question for us. Now, I haven't even got the first page, and I think my time is almost up, so we're going to have to speed it up here. So anyway, sometimes we were all on the same page, like when George Bush came to town and everyone knew what the issue was, and everyone said war criminals have no right to come to Canada, and maybe in the reflections part, if we have time, we can tell a couple stories about how we set the police in a tizzy over that one, demanding that they take action against this war criminal. So anyway, the 10 years of ECAWAR have been a question of reaffirming these principles that we have. And I think that that's been a very, very important part of the work that we've done. So it really came to a head, I would say, over Libya, in the sense that there was a huge, huge pressure on the people to accept that everything that we had stood for in the past no longer applied. And so, you know, we remembered the no-fly zones in Iraq, and we knew they were a prelude to war. But various people were saying that they were a means of having peace. And there was huge pressure on the anti-war movement to give way on this. And then, you know, we remembered that we had rejected the idea of regime change in Iraq, and that the Bush regime had the right to go and have regime change on the grounds that Saddam Hussein was a dictator and killing his own people and so on. So, but then when it came in Libya, it seemed that people had forgotten what it was that we stood for on these things. And why would we change our stand? So it's been a very, very important, and it shows, and this is really the point I want to make, is that things have become very complicated. It's not so simple just to say that we're for peace and we're against war, because things have become very complicated and imperialism has become very sophisticated. And Canada was very, very big part of this in terms of the question of responsibility to protect, where it's put forward this idea that there's such a thing as humanitarian war. Now, I would defy anyone to show us one country in which US imperialist invasion or British imperialist invasion or any other imperialist invasion has led to peace, stability, the rights of the people, democracy, or anything else. I mean, it's the worst travesty in the world to say such a thing. But yet, this is a complicated world we live in now. And so this shows that I think one of the tasks of the peace movement now, more than ever, is not only ourselves to engage in discussion, but to take it out you know, to the youth, to the workers, to the people of Canada, so that people can become part of this discussion of what is going on in the world and what stand should we take. Now, I just want to talk really quickly about some of our work on rights, and I'm getting the wrap up from Jim here, so I'm going to speed it up, okay? The real point I want to make on this is that Canadians do not trust the Harper government to look out for their security. So we have this, there's some very, very serious things going on, and in the new year, I think one of the things that ECAWAR is going to have to do is really discuss what's happening. We have new anti-terrorist legislation being put forward in the Parliament. It's a rehash of the legislation that was brought in after 9/11. that was supposedly had a sunset clause. Then Harper tried to reintroduce it when he had a minority government. It was rejected. And now it's coming in, but it's even more onerous than ever before. And what the point I want to make on this is that everything that you and I thought was rule of law, that's all been smashed to smithereens. So it's very, very important that the anti-war movement discuss these things and really go into them. What is going on here? Because we have, not just on the question of war, but on everything else, the very, very broad use of the arbitrary powers, or you could call them police powers, executive powers, the powers that belong to the prerogative. And Rob is going to talk about Omar Khadr, but I'll just make this one point on Omar Khadr, and that is that what the Supreme Court said, we have to really pay attention to. They said his rights had been violated, but it was the government's prerogative because it claimed it was foreign affairs. And so therefore the courts could not tell the government what remedy to bring in on this. So that should really be a sober warning to us to really pay attention and to discuss what are these rights that we have in Canada. When the Supreme Court can say that your rights have been violated, but the government does not have to act, and that's legal, that's the law. So those are the kind of issues that we're facing in the anti-war movement. They're complex. It means that a whole new world has unfolded on us, and we sometimes, I think, have to struggle to keep up with the speed of information, with the speed of the change. And so it really shows that the anti-war movement, I think, has some new work to do. We're really proud of the work we've done in organizing rallies and demonstrations, always being there, always responding to the attacks. But that reactive work, I think, has to give more rise to more proactive work. And so I think that's what, this meeting, in celebrating, I think that's part of what we're going to do. Now, something I wanted to say at the end, so I want to find out what it was. There with those 2 pages. Okay, so anyway, I think we can take pride in our accomplishments in standing on principle, but we also have to soberly look at what is required of us and rise to the occasion. I think this is the significance of getting together to celebrate our work in these 10 or so years, to discuss how far we've come and where we need to go in the future. We say Canada needs an anti-war government, so that is what guides our work. Thank you very much.